We were on our way to Joshua Tree, me, my wife, my 17-year-old daughter, Ruby, my 14-year-old daughter, Hart. And then a drunk and high driver going 90 miles an hour T-boned us, and Ruby and Hart in the back seat were killed. It was terrifying to step back into our home knowing that Ruby and Hart weren't there. Touching that grief, especially in the early days, is very scary. I feel terribly guilty. It's something that I struggle with every day. Survivor's guilt. Why do I get to have a new experience in my life? You know, shouldn't I be trapped in that moment forever? And it's hard to give ourselves permission to live. Yeah, to engage in joy again. We're gonna feel pain. We lost someone we love. It's inevitable, and it's feelings that we're gonna feel. But then there's all the suffering that can come with it, which is not helpful, like guilt, treating your body unhealthily with drugs, alcohol, not exercising, not sleeping, not eating. You can't affect the pain from loss. That's there. You can't minimize, you can't get rid of it, but you can get rid of all the other stuff that comes with it, or at least you can try. Everybody avoids grief. And we need to. You can't just grieve all the time. You wouldn't be in life, right? That was another way of being trapped if you're just grieving, it feels to me. So I've just found personally that I try to engage with it as often as it seems like a good idea. Yeah, I think a lot of people's miseries come from not talking about the tough stuff, avoiding the unpleasantries of life. And I wanted to help people by normalizing grief, by normalizing the ugliness that can happen as we grieve and saying that's okay too.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Gabby Reece Show. Colin Campbell, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to my house.
Oh, thank you.
We're just here to have a conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm really, I do a lot of interviews, and we talk, I love talking about ways people can care for themselves better. And I came upon your work because I have a couple friends, and they lost a son last year. And I came upon your book because I was thinking, this was new, uncharted territory. It's one thing, okay, my grandmother who was 90 passed away, my dad who, had been sick for 10 years. And It's just really, really different. And people always say that losing a child is something else. And so I came upon finding the words through another friend of mine. And so I was inspired by them to really talk to you. And after reading the book, I thought, this is so helpful for everyone, whether you're going through it or you're the friend of. But then if you step back from what you're talking about in finding the words, I think it's just a good way to tackle life.
I think so too. Yeah. I think a lot of people's miseries come from not talking about the tough stuff, right?
Yeah.
Avoiding the unpleasantries of life, and it causes trouble.
Yeah, so maybe for people who don't know the story, you could briefly share why you ended up writing this book.
What
happened?
Yeah, so spoiler alert, it's a tragedy. But we were on our way to Joshua Tree, a family of four, me, my wife, my 17-year-old daughter, Ruby, my 14-year-old daughter, Hart. And we love Joshua Tree. We actually just purchased or made an offer on a house. It was like a vacation home. It was going to be like this vacation home of our dreams. We were in an amazingly buoyant mood. And then a drunk and high driver going 90 miles an hour T-boned us. And Ruby and Hart in the back seat were killed.
Yeah, I mean, in reading the book too, it's just there's no way, and that's what you say. People will always say, there's no words to say. We don't know. There's nothing I can say. Right. And obviously that's where the title, Finding the Words, has come from. So maybe we can just walk through what happens to you and Gail in the beginning, because you break it down, and the thing that most of us are careful is when someone's going through something, you go, hey, listen, grieving is super personal. However, you're going to have good days and bad days, but you're sort of saying yes, and there's a process to grieving.
Yeah. Yeah. I read a lot of books early on, and it felt like there was this truism that was repeated over and over again, which is, everybody grieves in their own way. And a lot of the books were really trying to validate the griever, the reader. Say, like, whatever you're doing is great. Like, don't judge yourself. You're doing the right thing. And in a way, I was like, okay, but I'm lost. I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't need validation. I know I get to grieve. Some people do. Some people they're forced by society to doubt whether they have the right to grieve. Right? It was only a friend that died. Right? So why do they feel grief? Or that people. They do question if they get to grieve. I didn't have that question.
No.
But I felt, talking to other grievers, I felt that we don't grieve all differently in the end. It felt really like there was an awful lot of commonalities to all the people I was talking to. And so in a way, I started to rebel against that notion we all grieve in our own way. It felt to me like we all avoid grief in our own way. And that felt very true. I avoid my grief all the time. And so that feels very individualistic. How do we, but when we're actually grappling with grief, it seems like it's a pretty similar process. We're talking about the person who died. We're talking about how we're feeling in that moment. We're talking about our loss and trying to process it. That felt like what grieving is.
Yeah. And I can say, though, that it is something that you're the only person who could write this book. And, your experience and even the way that you look at it and approach it. And it does give permission to sort of say, well, this can be a way to go through it, because no one else could do that. You had to be the one.
I guess. I don't know.
You said you were writing things down almost immediately.
Yeah. I started writing what wound up being my solo show right away.
Yeah, the
shit show.
The shit show.
Grief, one man shit show. And I was immediately writing down sort of what felt like taboo thoughts, which I think is what you're sort of alluding to, is that I don't know, I get to write the darkest of thoughts. I don't get to, but I chose to, I guess, explore very early on these very complicated feelings that I was having. Yeah. Your
wife is Jewish, and you were sort of, I would say, it didn't feel like atheist, just kind of agnostic.
Yeah, I'm more towards atheist, I think, actually. Yeah, I've got some spirituality, but the idea that there's some God that's in control of everything is definitely doesn't resonate at all.
And you substitute, and I appreciated this. You were like, okay, instead of saying God, because she was like, listen, I'm interested in the kids being raised Jewish.
Yeah.
And you sat Shiva, and a rabbi was incredibly supportive. And,
yes.
And I want to get into Rabbi Sharon.
Yeah.
But you said, for you at least, you replaced God with the word love.
Yeah.
Where'd you get that from?
Well, that really helped me. I feel like I thought of it, but I did also encounter somebody who said that once. I forget where it was. I forget now.
Oh, leading with love. No, that was something else.
No, it was somebody just in passing. I forget where I got it, but it sure helped me in synagogue, sitting in synagogue. It suddenly made a lot of sense and it makes sense to me actually for real. Like the whole idea that love is holy, right? Love is special. Love is something that transcends life. So it makes a lot of sense to me.
So after the accident, there's so many emotions, and you talk about fear and grief. And so what is the process of moving into and dancing through your grief? Because it isn't like, okay, leaning into it and then you get over it. It's a continuous road.
Yeah.
But you definitely have these beginning steps.
Yeah, and the beginning steps are the scariest for sure. I just wanted a quick backtrack though. So I don't call it an accident. that killed
That's
Ruby and
right.
Hart.
It's a
crash.
Crash. I'm sorry.
I
That's
prefer
right.
crash.
Because accident would mean it's like something happened versus a crash can be avoided.
Yeah. Accidents like whoops, and accidents can happen to all of us. But if you get drunk and high and then you take your car keys in your hand and get into your car, that's intentional, and that's inviting somebody to die.
Yeah.
Ultimately, she was very drunk and very high and chose to drive and speed in her own neighborhood. So she lived nearby. So it wasn't like she didn't know, the speed limits or the dangers on that road. So
And she had been in trouble doing that before, right?
yeah. She had a prior DUI, and then she was in violation of the DUI because she was pulled over. I forget the exact details, but she had more alcohol. She'd done multiple times, right?
Yeah.
She was a multiple offender, and I imagine that she's struggling with addiction, and I just wanted to go back in time and tell her, struggle with your addiction at home.
Yeah,
right?
stay home.
Stay home.
Yeah.
It's not my business, but it becomes my business if you get behind a wheel and start driving. But back to the question about fear,
Yeah, because I think it's this really stood out for me that people don't realize like how much fear there is in the grief.
Yeah. I didn't, certainly. It struck us. I guess we were scared all night of the crash, but then we were coming home. We were put into a taxi from the hospital where we said goodbye to Hart.
Yeah.
And that felt surreal. It makes sense, but it just felt wrong. So we're driving in this taxi cab. I remember we got into the cab and the guy said, "Good morning, how's your day?"
No, he didn't.
Yeah, because he didn't know.
Yeah, he doesn't know.
He doesn't know. And I said, "It's the worst day of my life." And that was the end of that. I think he figured out very quickly that was a bad thing that had happened in the hospital.
Yeah.
And we drove in near silence. And then we get out of the cab and we're walking into our home, and it was just terrifying. It was terrifying to step back into our home knowing that Ruby and Hart weren't there. It was scary to think about sitting at the dining room table without them. It was scary. And so Gail's sisters, Nina and Betsy, took turns staying with us the first few months, I think, really. So we wouldn't have to sit, just the two of us, at the dining room table.
Yeah.
It was terrifying. And to sleeping alone in our house. We weren't alone, we had each other, but it felt that way. And then the fear is, I think the fear is that I would lose my mind. That if I fully took in the reality that Ruby and Hart were gone forever, I would lose my mind and never come back. And I think that's very common.
Yeah.
And then there was the fear that if I really started weeping, just, keening, it would never stop.
Like once you open that up,
Yeah,
you would never be able to turn it off.
How would I? Why would I? The reason why I was crying is because they're dead. They're always going to be dead, so I will keep crying until I die, lose my mind, whatever, right? That's what it felt like. And so touching that grief, especially in the early days, is very scary. And that's why people don't want to look at the pictures of their dead children, for example. Have a hard time even looking at friends and family. I remember the first time they came in, it was scary because why was it scary? It was, though, the idea that this dynamic is gone, that it's and that they're still alive and Ruby and Hart aren't. So the world is still going, but it felt like we're not. We're stuck. Maybe so. That was the fear. Yeah.
And what is a first step? Like, what is a person, a parent, someone who's lost someone? Is it going to talk to someone? Is it going to a grief group? Like, what's the first that you found in your experience?
Yeah.
The things that were the sort of best first steps to leaning into this experience.
Yeah, the new reality that we're in.
Yeah.
I think it's sort of all of the above. just looking at their pictures.
You went the other way in certain ways, right? Like you got bigger pictures.
Right.
Where'd you get that idea from?
Well, we had blown up photos of them at the funeral, which apparently is normal. I hadn't been to too many funerals in my life, and certainly not of children. So, but there was 2 photos of each of them right there for the funeral, and then we brought them home. They gave them to us. So here we are holding our children, right? Giant images of our children in our hands, and then we're like, let's put them up in the living room. So we taped them to the walls of the living room, and then I was like, I want more of them. So I got 4 more. Now there are 8 3x2 photos, all in our living room, turning the whole place into this shrine.
How was Gail? Was she on board with that?
Oh yeah. We were pretty amazingly in sync through the whole early grief. Yeah, definitely. We wanted their giant faces looking at us, but it hurt. It's not like it's easy. It's never easy to look at your children who are gone, or any loved one, I imagine. It's going to always take its toll. And I write about this in the book. At a certain morning, I came down the stairs and I looked at the photos and I looked away because it was just too scary in that moment. I was early in the morning and I was like, I can't. And that terrified me. Wait a minute, I'm going to look away from my children. What the hell is this, right? No way. And that's where I think we were sort of saying, like, I went the other way. I was like, all right, now I see I don't like that. I don't like looking away from them out of fear. So that's bad for me personally. So I'm going to go the other way and be very intentional about, taking them in and taking in my grief.
And how did you end up with Rabbi Sharon? Because I feel like Rabbi Sharon, I know you sat Shiva, and was there anything that happened after that week? And that that's for people who don't know. It's very intense. Shiva is. Yeah. I mean, you're at home. People are coming.
People come to your house.
They're bringing tons of food.
Yeah.
You at the end, everyone takes a nice walk together.
Right.
And for me, the other interesting part was when you bury somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like you said, you're gonna look.
Yeah.
Right. You're gonna throw the first dirt.
Yep. You're literally going to take dirt into your hands and bury your children with your bare hands. And then you're going to watch as the rest of your loved ones continue burying them. And everybody that shows up throws shovelfuls of dirt onto the coffins. And it's super rough. But it's also beautiful. I mean, it doesn't feel beautiful, but now looking back, it's like, that's a beautiful gesture of love. And it was very painful emotionally, obviously, but also it was a car crash we were in. So both Gail and I were in a lot of physical pain. And we had to sit. We had pillows, but that was it. And people kept wanting to hug us, right? Because that makes sense. But Gail had broken ribs.
Yeah, which is
literally
the worst.
Broken ribs.
Yeah.
And people were grabbing and hugging her fiercely. And so... friends of ours who were beautiful friends, they made shirts that said, don't hug Gail, hug me instead.
Those are good friends.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
And so it was this amazingly surreal, beautiful thing that someone would come up and would want to hug Gail and then wouldn't because the shirt said, don't hug Gail. And then they'd hug this other woman, this Rebecca, 2 Rebeccas who did this. And so they became our proxy huggers. And that was beautiful too, right? People could hug. We'd see these friends who loved Ruby and Hart and us hugging each other.
I was thinking about it when I was thinking about the story. Was there anything different for you than for Gail because you were driving the vehicle?
Yeah.
I wondered if you carried a different load than Gail.
Definitely. I still do. Yeah. I feel terribly guilty. It's something that I struggle with every day. So I get behind the wheel of the car all the time, right? And every time I get behind the wheel of the car, I think about it. Every time I turn, because it was a turn, I'm making a left-hand turn, and then we got hit. Because it looked safe. It should have been safe because the car was far away. And even if they were going the speed they were going, they could have had plenty of time to slow down, but they didn't slow down at all.
Because
she was drunk and high.
Yeah.
So she was going
no
40 miles above the freeway speed limit. So we were hit. But I have to live with that because the what ifs, and it is not easy,
Is there anything that somebody gave you to read or said to you that actually registered, and why that it wasn't your fault? Was there a time when somebody, either it was the timing of when they said it or something that you read that you knew in your heart, like, this wasn't my fault?
Not completely, because that sounds like I'm all good.
No, I don't. No,
what do you mean
no.
help? Do you mean help to alleviate that feeling?
Yeah, no,
that was
not
my
of
fault?
course.
Right.
The byproduct, but just that part.
Yeah. Well, the police officer in charge did a very elaborate crash site analysis, and he came and presented his findings to Gail and I, which motivated their recommended charge of second-degree murder. And so he explained that to us and talked us through where the car was, how fast it was going, the fact that she didn't touch her brakes at all, and that was helpful. Helpful. And then a therapist, Dr. Grayson, who's actually Ruby's old therapist, OCD therapist, he said that guilt is a form of denial.
Yeah.
And that really resonated when he explained it to me. The idea is that if I'm thinking I could have made that turn earlier or later and they'd still be alive, that means I'm living in that moment still. I'm still engaged in that reality as if I could change the past, right? So I'm dwelling in guilt. While I'm doing that, I'm dwelling in a fantasy that Ruby and Hart are still alive in the back seat, and I can make a different choice and save them. And that's denial, because that happened a long time ago, and I can't change it.
Is that the stuff that could really make somebody, like when I read about the denial, when you talk about that, you have an entire chapter about it. And the other thing I want to say that I appreciate about this book is, so you parse out all these things, talking about holidays. We're gonna get into that, and rage and all of these things. Yeah. But you put very clear reminders at the end of every chapter of things, actions, and acts that people can do. There's even ways to enter into your journal. So you don't just go, okay, let's examine this, but you also really activate people at the end of every chapter about try this, do this, and give them permission too. I love, in the beginning you were talking about try something new every single week.
Yeah.
I thought, wow, that's interesting, because it gives people permission to do something new in their life that is not part of their old life,
right? Which
I would imagine is a real battle, internal battle.
Yeah, it's all about that, like you said, permission, like survivor's guilt. Why do I get to have a new experience in my life? Shouldn't I be trapped in that moment forever? I'm trapped in the moment of the crash, and it's hard to give ourselves permission to live. Yeah, to engage in joy again. Yeah.
You your mother-in-law lost a child, and then sort of swept the house of the daughter, and then your wife was born years later, and nobody's talked about it. And there was something in that you went, okay, we're going to go the opposite way.
Yeah,
we're going to do this really different.
Yeah.
So how long into after the crash are you sort of trying to figure out, because it feels really it's so deliberate, the way that you leaned into this.
Yeah.
How long until you go, no, I'm going to get in here? And I think you call it the dark shadows, or the shadow feelings, or, doing. There's a quote in your book talking about this stuff in the shadows.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Remember? No, I'm just kidding. No, and just getting in there and unearthing it.
Yeah.
And what do you think about Gail was like, yeah, I'm on board with this?
Yeah. Well, I think she had grown up, like you said, in this household that had a secret, that there was a death and a grief that was secret, and maybe shameful, and hanging over the family. And they were doing the best they could. They didn't know what to do with this catastrophic loss, right?
Right, it was a 2-year-old daughter.
2-year-old daughter died of some kind of like pneumonia complications. And there was a doctor who was telling them, just give, over the phone, just, there's a winter storm, don't come into the hospital, just give them more Tylenol, whatever. And that was terrible advice. And so I remember Roz, her mom, talking about that doctor and just the rage that she felt. But this is many years later. So at the time, like you said, they sort of banished talk of Barbara. Barbara was the name of the girl who died. And Gail didn't even find out about her existence until she was 7, and it was her dad accidentally let slip that their mom was at the cemetery visiting Barbara's grave. And so I think Gail also knew instinctually that that's not the way we were going to go, that doesn't work, that you can't box up somebody, a grief, and expect that it's going to work out well, So we didn't really did we have conversations about it? I don't know, but we talked about everything, but I think the conversation was short. It was like, yes, we're not, it was no option. Of course, we're going to talk about Ruby and Hart. We're not going to pretend they didn't exist. That's not an option, obviously. And then, in fact, we really need to talk about them. And that was made clear to me, especially through Shiva. Because, as you said, every night for a week after the funeral, people come to your house. And it was a lot of people coming to our house. And I really didn't understand why that would happen. Like, why are people coming to my house? Like, that's crazy. I'm shattered and unable to function. Why am I, quote unquote, hosting people? But that's not, I wasn't hosting them. They were coming and hosting me in my own home, which I discovered. But in the process of that, I basically trusted to the Jews. That was my motto. I had no idea how to grieve, and I was like, I'm just going to do what the Jews tell me to do. And I love our Rabbi Sharon Brous. She's amazing. And she and the head of our synagogue, Melissa Balaban, they showed up at our doorstep hours after the crash and literally held our hands and helped us make funeral arrangements, burial plans, right? So they were extraordinarily beautiful, brave people who walked with us in the darkest of moments. So yeah, I'm going to trust Sharon. And so she said, here's the deal. People are coming to the house. And I was like, okay. But then it felt right because all these people were gathered. And then I was like, oh, I want to talk about Ruby and Hart. I want to talk about this catastrophic thing that just happened to me. How could I not talk about it? I talked about it in my mind as like the equivalent of like, if I had a spear, someone just drove a spear through my chest and blood was splattering all over me. And then I went to like a garden party. Everybody would talk about the spear, right? You wouldn't be like just chatting. You'd be like, oh my God, there's a spear in your chest, just blood all over the place. And be like, let's talk about it, right? But emotional wounds, you can't see them so easily. And sometimes people don't want to talk about it.
Yeah. And you talk about this moving to friends. It's like some friends would not grieve in front of you about the loss of your children.
Right.
Because they had relationships and loved, Ruby and Hart, and they would go privately. And you're saying, no, talk about them, say their name, cry in front of me.
Cry with me, yeah.
And that's okay.
Right.
I think the obvious would be that the burden, people think it's not their burden to put onto you. And maybe you could say really how it lands for you as the person who is really experiencing this incredible tragic loss. What does it do for you when someone's like, I miss them?
Right. Or
I'm emotional and crying. What did that do for you?
Yeah, it means the world to me. It's like, oh, Ruby and Hart aren't going to be forgotten. The world's not going to spin. It's going to keep spinning, but it's going to keep spinning and thinking about Ruby and Hart. I used to have this line in my solo show, but I took it out. But I should put it back in because I just love it so much. But basically, I was like, watching little kids cry was like the best for me. Like seeing Ruby and Hart's friends like weeping, I was like, yes, yes, cry, little kid, cry for my children, because then I'm not alone. And it's like there's an impact, and you can feel the impact of the loss. So that's what I would tell adults when they would creep away and cry, is like, if you stay with me, yeah, if you start crying, I'm probably going to cry too. Yeah, probably. But I cry all the time. I need to cry. So what? And it's not like you're causing me pain. But I get that's how it feels to other people, or it looks like that. Like, oh, I made Colin cry. It's like, you didn't do that. The drunk driver made me cry, right?
Yeah.
Ruby and Hart gone is what's crying. You crying is just, it's just helping me not feel alone.
Yeah, because reframing that, because as an outsider, it would feel selfish.
Right.
You'd be like, how do I have that audacity? This person is going through this.
Yeah.
But it's you're expressing your love for someone that you love very much too.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really empowering, to let people know it's okay. Like, say their name. Don't be afraid to bring them up.
Right.
Because part of this, and I didn't realize it until after reading your book, it's like, you can also, so you lose your children, but then all of a sudden you start losing, and your identity. You said, hey, I'm a hands-on father. This was a role that I'm in, that now he's gone.
Yeah.
And now you're losing friends.
Right.
Because they don't know how. So why do you think that is?
Well, I think in early grief, it's so hard for the griever who's in acute grief. There are times when you do want to be left alone, right? So that was so great about Shiva, is that every night of Shiva, I did not want people to come over. I wanted to be left alone, but it was like, no, this is the rules. This is what happens. Deal with it. And I was like, okay, because the Jews are telling me to do that, I'm going to do it. And I was wise. I'm grateful. But without those set rules, it becomes really easy. Is a strange word to use, but like it's somebody calls you up and says, hey, do you want to go for a walk tomorrow? The first thought in acute grief is, I can't tell you how I'm going to feel 10 minutes from now. I'm not going to commit to a walk tomorrow, so no. So I think a lot of people get no's early on from people in fresh acute grief. They're just like, no, I'm not going to commit to anything. And then people get the wrong impression, oh, let's leave them alone forever. Let's leave them alone until they reach out to us. And then as the griever, a week or two goes by and you're like, why aren't these people reaching out to me? What the hell is wrong with them? Mm-hmm. This horrible tragedies happened to me and people are leaving me alone? That's crazy. I hate them.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's where I think the rift can come.
And you have a way of dealing with that too, which you give examples of, even, let's say, two different scenarios. One person who comes around and says some really stupid shit, because people, they say wild things.
Yeah. Well, they say wild things, I think, because they're trying to fix it. They're trying to minimize your pain in a way to take it away. They see me, I'm in terrible pain. It hurts them. It's very uncomfortable. So it's like, well, what can I say to make Colin feel less pain? And inevitably, that's going to come off wrong because you're trying to minimize. So like, oh, they're in a better place, or I don't know, you can have other kids, or or at least they live for a long time. No, don't say that to me. But people say that to people who lose infants all the time, apparently. Yeah,
really?
Yeah.
At least they live for a long time.
Oh, no,
an old person.
No. At least you got the years you got. Like, you got 17 years. Or these aren't things that were said to me.
No, but it's like things people say.
Things people say, yeah. They say things to minimize your pain, and that doesn't work. That's the backfiring thing.
So you had two approaches. Like, you have a woman that would come over and she was lovely, but she would, because of this need to really make you feel better, would really inevitably say things that were not great.
Yeah.
So you wrote her a letter.
Yeah, an email. Yeah,
and we're just really clear about, we love you, but when you say these things, it doesn't work for us.
It doesn't help. Yeah. And what was so beautiful about that, we said, we're going to take a walk. Let's take a walk tomorrow. And then we sent the email, hey, by the way, on
before
this
you
walk,
come,
just so you know, heads up, we want to talk about this on the walk. And that helped her because then she could process it in her own time. And then she wrote back right away this beautiful letter. I tear up every time I read it, but I'm going to paraphrase it now. But basically it was, thank you for telling me this. I'm tearing up. I've never had to walk with somebody who's experienced this kind of a loss before. And inevitably, I'm going to fall on my face and thank you for helping me. And then when we took the walk, she also was wise enough to realize like how much that meant, how much our friendship meant to us, that we would do that we would send an email rather than just write her off, you know?
Yeah.
And she said, I value how important, I value how much you value our relationship, that you were willing to do that, to send me that email.
Yeah. And would you and Gail like go, okay, who would write it? Who would say, what would you guys?
Yeah, we sat in bed and wrote it together. And definitely parsed each word. And by the way,
both of you are creative, and Gail's a writer.
Right.
I mean, you do have some benefits, advantages from the rest of us. So in that, let's say in that walk, the other side of that is like, do you want people to be like, well, the weather? It's sort of like, is it just, let's talk about it all, let's be really honest, give you space so that you can share your feelings? I think in that other guidance is, what are the best, like, is the lady supposed to say, oh, I got these really cute new sneakers I like for this walk? Like, do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, also within that is, because it's not about being, you can't be normal. Right. Something huge has happened.
Right.
So what is the way?
Yeah, for me, what was really helpful was, as you mentioned earlier, if they start sharing about Ruby and Hart, if they tell me a Ruby and Hart story, or just how they're missing Ruby and Hart. And then I love people asking me about my grief. How are you doing today? I know some people grieving can get irritated when someone says like, hey, how you doing? Because they're like, well, how do you think I'm doing?
Yeah.
But I feel like if somebody's more specific, how are you doing today? Like, how are you doing right now with your grief? That's different. That's not like a superficial, how's it going?
Yeah.
That's like really a genuine question. Right now, how are you in your grief? And I feel like that wouldn't offend anybody, as far as I can tell. And then sharing about the person who passed away, I can't imagine how that would ever offend somebody. Even if somebody was really struggling in that moment, and let's say didn't want to talk about their dead loved one in that moment, let's just say, hypothetically, right? And you brought that person up, it wouldn't be so terrible. That person could just say, thank you, but I just can't talk about them right now.
Yeah.
And that would be okay, right?
I think
that wouldn't be so bad.
That's important, that deciphering that, because what happens is we want to not make it worse. Right. But by you being that direct, it's like I haven't hurt you more.
Yeah.
And that now you've said, hey, Gabby, I don't want to talk about that right now.
Right.
I haven't hurt you more by even bringing it up.
Right.
It's giving you that opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
The other thing that well, you did so many, but Gail, before she went back into work, wrote everyone a really specific email about like sort of her needs, her wants. Please don't say these types of things. If you believe this, maybe keep it to yourself.
Right.
Like you said earlier, like, oh, they're in a better place.
Yeah.
She was very clear, like, if you believe that, that's fine. Please keep that to yourself.
Right.
Where did the idea come from to really lay that road before she had to enter back into work?
It was her thinking about those people at work, and think specifically about all those individuals. There are a lot of individuals. So, but she knew amongst some of them that was something that they held on to for their own losses and grieves. So she knew that thought helped them. And she said, that's wonderful, but she needed to protect herself. Mm-hmm. She didn't want to walk into an environment and have somebody say something to her that was going to make her upset and say, they're not in a better place, they're underground, and they should be home with me.
Yeah.
She didn't need to go there in that moment. And so that was, in a way, a protection. But the real benefit, I think, of sending the email was that she was giving them permission to talk about Ruby and Hart and her grief, and not let it be this white elephant in the room.
Yeah.
That was the biggest protection for her, because the thought of walking into that room with a lot of people and nobody saying anything about Ruby and Hart, or the fact that they were dead, seemed like that would be intolerable to her.
Yeah.
And definitely a possibility. People are at work, they think, oh, it's a professional setting. She doesn't want to think about her loss right now. She's doing a job, so let's not mention it. You never know, but that's definitely a possibility. So that was avoided by her sending the email.
I think the truest thing about death is that everybody always brings it back into their own life, right? That's why we're scared of it. That's why it makes us uncomfortable, because it makes us always think about ourselves and our own lives. I think for a lot of people that things happen and love is risk, and we are all going to die at some point. I think when it's so present, it freaks people out.
Yeah.
Because it makes them think about their own lives.
Yeah. Yeah. For Gail and I, that it was not quite like that. Only because I think part of the struggle is, why are we still living?
Well, no, you guys already had the worst thing happen. I'm just talking about all the people around you.
Yes.
No, you guys, it's probably like, what else?
We kind of felt a little bit like, we had this ridiculous joke, like I don't know where it came from, but we were on a train in Italy, and we were like, if somebody tries to hijack the train or the plane, we're just gonna scream we're gonna go for it. We're gonna attack the person with a gun. But we didn't want one of us to die and leave the other one alone. So we had a code word. So the code word was "for Orso," and then both of us would leap up into the gunfire together, so we'd die together. That was our plan. And our dog's name is Orso.
Yeah.
So so we weren't particularly scared about dying. We just didn't want to die, have one of us die, not the other one. That was our plan. But.
Well, and that makes one can wonder if after going through all of this, are you less afraid? Would you say at all you were a worrier? You don't cross me seem like one, but prior to the crash, besides the loss, is there things where you are braver, less scared?
Yeah. I'm definitely braver about socially awkward things, like asking for help. You know what I mean? Because who cares? So I definitely feel a lot less social anxiety. For sure. And then the tenuous relationship to life, I feel is not a great thing. So I'm trying to care more about staying alive, honestly, and I am, and I think it's working. I'm being more engaged with life. Yeah, you encourage people to do that in your book. You're like, hey, try new things, go do stuff. Right. It seems like you were a lot like that already, but it seems like you're also reminding people, keep doing those things. Yeah. I think I was scared of that feeling of not being connected to life. That was not a good place to be for me. I didn't like it. And so I was like, I'm just going to do whatever I can to reconnect and reinvest in life, even though Ruben and Hart aren't here, and do whatever I can do to do that. And I found some specific actions that helped, and that's why I wanted to put them in the book. Yeah, and your one-man show, which is, it's kind of ballsy. Like, do people get offended? Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you talk about your loss in a comedic framework. Yeah. Do they get upset? No. They don't? No, but I thought they would. That's awesome. So the first performance, this friend of mine was the director, and he was like, I don't know what's going to happen. We didn't know. Right, you don't advertise. You have your immediate group. I mean, the theater lets people know. So you think that's really brave, actually. Yeah, we had no idea. And the really scary thing is, I knew there would be people in the audience with dead kids. Yeah. Every night. I knew that, and I'd say some rude things about people with dead kids. I make dark jokes. It ends up in a very positive place. My character goes to a dark place, and then it turns, and they have a. I feel like they land in a place of empathy and grace. What do you have? Can you share one? Well, it's out of context. It's out of context, but okay. But what I can share. The one example is that one of the darkest ones is that, like, I'm in a grief group, but I'm sharing about how I'm not relating to people who've lost just one kid and have other living children. And then this mom starts to share about the death of her only child, but she's only 25 years old. And I'm like, she's going to have another kid. Yeah. So like, fuck her. Fuck her and her fertile body. And it's like, it's dark. It's not, and
but it's
sometimes people don't laugh at that
It's
joke.
so honest, though, because of course
real,
you would
right?
think that.
Right. How could I not think that?
Of course you would think that.
Yeah. She's going to grieve for the rest of her life, but she's also going to be able to have
And she has
a
another
family.
crack at
She has
it.
another crack at it, and I don't.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I don't.
At least in that way.
Yeah, in that way. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah. But like I said, it turns, and I start to appreciate that my loss is actually not the hardest. That there are other levels of grief that I'd never thought of before, and my character has a real sort of awakening that grief is grief and loss is loss, and let's not compare loss. It doesn't help.
Yeah.
It doesn't help to compare losses.
As somebody who has friends going through a lot of different things, people are always going through things. I'm curious, is there a different technique that a friend can do? Because when you have a crash, it's instantaneous and you don't see it coming and it's a surprise. Okay, that's one thing. What about when people are going through someone who is having a long illness?
Yeah.
I interviewed somebody once. She wrote a book called Widowish, and her husband was not well. And so she gave real things about like what you could do because he was sick for a long time.
Yeah.
Have you talked to a lot of people where certain things would be more helpful, or there's a way to approach what they're going through?
Right.
Because it's different.
It is different. It absolutely is different. And most of the people that I've spoken with were sudden deaths, either car crashes or drug overdoses or some kind of medical fluke.
Yeah.
Are the people, they're all quick, sudden, unexpected deaths are almost all the parents that I've talked to in depth, so I don't really know. But those people are grieving. It's called anticipatory grief. So they're grieving in the process because they're losing the person. And then there's ambiguous loss too, which is if the body's never found, or there's all sorts of ambiguous losses. They're all kind of different. But at heart, I think, is about not abandoning people in their grief. That it feels very lonely. It feels lonely because you've lost or you're losing the person that's closest to you in the world, so you're going to feel lonely automatically.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, people are unsure how to relate to you, and they tend to back off. And so not backing off, I guess, is the best. Yeah. Keep reaching out. And if someone says, no, I don't want to go for a walk with you.
It's not about, don't take it personal.
Don't take it personal. Just ask again in a week.
Yeah.
And, if you're close to them. If you're not close to them, don't keep harassing them.
Right. There's got to be a level of intimacy
if you already know them, then yes.
What are some books that you read that really supported you?
Yeah. So very early on, I was given Bearing the Unbearable by Dr. Joanne Cacciatore. And that was very helpful. Because that was all about embracing grieving. Let's not put it off. Let's. I don't think she uses the phrase "lean into the pain," but let's grieve. Let's do it. And I found that very useful. And I sent it to my family. I got copies and mailed it to my entire family. I said, "Read this book," because I wanted them to know that we were going to grieve Ruby and Hart. That was our path, and I wanted everyone on board. And I think that helped. And then Megan Devine's "It's Okay, You're Not Okay" was helpful to me. Mm-hmm. One of her ideas that really resonated with me was this idea of separating the pain of grief from the suffering that comes with it. And so she made a very clear distinction that we're going to feel pain. We lost someone we love. We're going to feel that pain. That's quote unquote natural. I don't think she uses the word natural and healthy, but that's what I think of them as. Like it's inevitable and it's feelings that we're going to feel. But then there's all this suffering that can come with it, which is not helpful, like guilt, like treating your body unhealthily with drugs, alcohol, not exercising, not sleeping, not eating, being around people who are toxic or not helping you in your grief, or isolating, being alone.
Yeah.
All these unhelpful things And can we minimize those? Those things we can affect. You can't affect the pain from loss. That's there. You can't minimize. You can't get rid of it. But you can get rid of all the other stuff that comes with it, or at least you can try.
And you say that many times. At the end of every chapter is exercise. You're like, don't, use drugs and alcohol to minimize. You just said get to sleep. How would one sleep?
Yeah.
At all,
right?
After something like that, or you just kind of go through it, and then after time you sleep a little better, and then maybe you sleep a little better, and then one night you don't sleep at all. Like,
right.
Is it just the ebb and flow of that?
Yeah, I think you can't help that, but sleep hygiene you can, right? So you don't, don't look at your phone at night before you go to bed. So my wife, she keeps her phone on a bureau far away, so she doesn't,
grab it.
Yeah, grab it in the middle of the night and stay awake. And we tried like meditation for a while and things, and that helped a little bit. But it's a sleep hygiene. It's a typical things, So
go to bed around the same time.
Yeah, go around the same time. Don't lie in bed during the day, because then you're telling your mind that the bed is a place where you stay awake and read or sit or watch TV. Only lie in bed when it's time to go to bed. The sort of simple standard sleep hygiene.
The 4 agreements you mention in the book, or ground rules, excuse me, not agreements, sort of some ground rules that you laid out.
In the grief spiel, you mean?
Yes.
In
the grief spiel, because I mean, you really chunk this out for people about asking for what you need and, saying it clearly. Where did you come up with that?
The grief spiel?
The grief spiel.
Yeah.
The Jews really did make an impact on you.
Yeah. I think I'm Jew adjacent. I refer to myself as. I love going to synagogue. I love all the holidays. And once you replace God with love, I'm down. Right. I'm down. And I love my rabbi. She says, has amazing sermons. Beautiful, beautiful sermons. And that's what I insisted when Gail was like, we need to belong to a synagogue. I was like, oh, we do? She's like, yes, we have a baby girl now. Ruby's just been born. We're joining a synagogue. And I was like, well, only if the rabbi says really interesting things. Yeah. I'm not going to sit through a sermon that I don't think is interesting. So we shopped around, and then we found Rabbi Sharon Rouse, and I was like, oh, I like what she's saying. So yeah.
But in your spiel.
Oh, the spiel, right? Spiel. I like this. I like spiel. Spiel means play in German, so it's playful right away, and it's like a little Yiddish. It's nice. But the idea was that people were scared to talk to us, and I needed to talk about Ruby and Hart, and I needed to tell them the ground rules so that we could have a conversation and not just be like staring at each other in horror, right? Or just wordlessly like, ooh, what can you say? Yeah, goodbye.
Yeah, that was great.
That was great. So we'd pull them aside one at a time, Gail and I, and we say, here's the deal. Here's their spiel, which is we need to talk about Ruby and Hart. We need to say their names because people didn't know, right? Yeah. They're not going to say Ruby and Hart's names. We can talk about your kids. People were worried. If they mentioned their kids, we would freak out. Like, your kid's alive and mine's not. And we do have those thoughts, of course. Yeah. But we also need to talk to our friends. So we have to get over it in a way, or not get over it, but we have to allow ourselves to feel that.
Slowly integrate it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Integrate that reality. But so we need to talk about Ruby and Hart, and we need to talk about our grief. We can talk about other things for like 5 minutes or something, but then we got to circle back to our grief.
Yeah, the spear in the stomach.
Yeah. It's just sticking out of my stomach. Yeah. Why can't you mention it? There's blood. You're getting blood on you. Yeah. React to it. But and we would change our grief spiel as time went on. So very early on, people were trying to relate to us by sharing their losses. They say, like, oh, my cousin died 10 years ago, and in a way, in acute grief, I didn't have room. I didn't want to hear about their dead cousin. I was like, okay, but your cousin died a long time ago, and they were like an adult, and Ruby and Hart were my children. That's it. I can't talk about people's grief right now. But that changed. So I dropped that part. So initially I said, I don't give a shit about your dead grandma, or your favorite cat who's dead, or your dad who died at 60. I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
That was what I said, because I'm blunt. But that changed. And then I'm happy to talk about your dead cat. Or honestly, I am. I'm happy to talk about that grief because I can relate to that because I love my dog. So.
Yeah. What's your dog's name?
Orso.
Remember? Oh, yeah. Oh, he's still the same dog?
Oh, yeah, he's the same dog, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Orso.
Ruby picked him out.
Oh.
She got him from a shelter. We said she was allergic to dogs, and we're like, you have to get a hypoallergenic dog, but it has to be a rescue. Good luck.
Yeah, seriously.
And she found one. And he was a good dog. He's a good dog.
From everything I read about Ruby, she, you talk about how when she went to high school, she was sort of an activist and kind of squash bullying at her school. It just really was badass.
Yeah.
And I can't help but think that you were in Ruby and Ruby is in you. Because for you to write this book and be that defiant to this, tonally, I was like, oh, they have the same tone.
Yeah. And Hart was a clown after my own heart.
And a sweetie pie.
Yeah.
He sounded like the lover.
Super sweet.
Yeah. Holidays and firsts.
Yeah.
These are brutal.
They're brutal. There's no way around it. They're brutal. Even now, 4 years on, they're brutal. And we found, I talk about different holidays and how we approach them the first year. And in general, I find it's useful to embrace them as things you can have rituals with, and that you can use them to talk about your loss. So for Thanksgiving, we went around the table and talked about Ruby and Hart, and gave thanks for Ruby and Hart and told Ruby and Hart stories. So that was helpful, because a holiday without Ruby and Hart is awful, right? So there's I remember my sister-in-law, she got chocolates, and she accidentally got chocolates for Ruby and Hart because she couldn't process that they weren't there. And then she was like in tears, like, I got these, I got too many because Ruby and Hart. You know what I mean? Like, it was like, it's so hard to really process a loss like that. And so in general, I try to get through holidays with rituals of some kind of something so that I honor my grief, and then stay in the present. That's the sort of the ideal. Yeah. But our first Christmas, we didn't. We broke all those rules, and we just nixed Christmas altogether. We pretended it didn't exist, and we ran away. We didn't run away from our grief, but we ran away from America, basically.
But I would think the rules would make sense that they would need, like you talk about the spiel. Like the spiel, we're going to keep morphing it and changing it based on what the timing and the needs are.
Right.
And I really appreciate that. You're like, no, we have to keep some of these rituals, and we're going to make new ones and pivot. And occasionally we might say, guess what? The day before Christmas isn't happening.
Yeah.
And that's okay too.
Right.
Giving people that permission.
Yeah. To follow what feels right.
Yeah. And blending the need, but also living right here, right now.
Yeah.
When you have great days as a family, I know you're in the process of having siblings, adopting siblings.
Yes, we're fostering to adopt two siblings.
When you have a great day, do you think to yourself, I shouldn't have this great day? Ruby and Hart would be so happy we're having this great day. A mixture of all things.
Yeah.
Well, what is that like now?
Yeah. So, a good day with our quote unquote new family, that's a great thing to have. But there's always that heartache and aching. So I gave this example before, but we were having a pool party for our daughter that we're fostering to adopt, and she was having an amazing time with her new friends and splashing around in our pool. It seemed so beautiful, and it was so beautiful that there were kids joyously laughing in the pool again. That seemed so wonderful, and then heartbreaking. And so I stepped away and just looked up and said, I don't know if I said, "Hey, Ruby and Hart," or "Sorry, Ruby and Hart," or, I don't know what I said, but it's always there. It doesn't go away, right?
Yeah.
But I sure like that there was kids laughing. It was better than me aching for Ruby and Hart and nobody else laughing in the pool.
Right. And you talk about sort of keeping things relevant, like you're here and you're living.
Right.
You and Gail are living.
Right. It doesn't help to stay in that moment of the car crash.
Yeah.
It doesn't do anybody any good. It's not honoring Ruby and Hart, to my mind, to just be locked away in the past. So it seems sweet. We get to talk about Ruby and Hart to these new kids, and they know all about Ruby and Hart.
Can you share how old they are?
Yeah, okay. I can't say their names yet because we're still foster parents. But the brother is 13 and the sister's 12.
So close.
Yeah.
Close in age.
Yeah, close in age.
I was surprised that a couple of years after Ruby and Hart passed away, you did foster a girl.
Yes.
For 18 months.
18 months, and we were on a track to foster to adopt her.
Yeah. And she chose to sort of age out of this, she was going to go and age out of the system. Maybe she wanted to not be attached.
Right.
It seemed like.
It felt like she didn't want to be attached to a family. She ultimately decided that being a part of family was too uncomfortable for her because she wasn't used to it.
Yeah.
She was used to being neglected.
Yeah, sure.
And she literally said, I want to, she didn't use the word neglected. She said, I'm used to being in my own room and being alone and crying every night. And that feels comfortable.
Yeah, it's what you know.
It's what she knows.
Yeah. Well, you say this a lot. To love is a gamble and it's a risk. It just is.
Yeah.
It just is. Yeah. And when I read that, I thought, I mean, what did you and Gail, you probably understood, I would imagine.
Yeah.
But then how do you have to recover again from that? And how do you say we're going to throw our hat back in the ring and try? What's the conversation around that?
Yeah. It was, so we were grieving the loss of the previous girl. I thought she was my daughter. I called her my daughter.
Yeah.
18 months in my house. And so we had to grieve that loss. And then it's that's an ambiguous loss because she's still out there in the world. Mm. We text every now and again, like every 3 months, we'll do like a very superficial,
checking
sweet,
on you, saying hello.
Yeah, it's just a sweet, hey, hi, how's this, how's that? And then she inevitably stops texting back, we take it back and forth a couple times and then it's just silence. And oh, well, she's moved on to something else,
Yeah.
She's a teenager, she's 16 now. But it's an ambiguous loss because she's still out there and still in danger. That population, teenagers who are aging out of the foster system, statistically, it's very, very bleak, very bleak. And she knew about those statistics, and she's like, "Yep, that's what they are, and that's what I'm choosing." Yeah. It's just like, wow, okay. So we were like, well, she's gone. We're back to us again. We love each other, but we still feel like we could be good parents. And maybe we should try again. We know more now about how to be parents to kids from the foster system. Right? We learned a lot from the first daughter. And so we're like, well, we know so much more than your average person who's trying to foster adopt. We've had so much more experience, both with parenting and then foster parenting. Why can't we share our love again and see what happens? And it's not like a fairy tale because nobody is parenting. And these teenagers, they're like, they wouldn't necessarily choose us, right? They're
pretty fortunate to have you.
Well, but not really.
Wait, what do you mean? Oh, well, because of all that's gone down?
Yeah, and nobody wants to be adopted by strangers, right? Nobody wants that. If you think about yourself as a kid, like, hey, do I want strangers to come and take me off into another life? That's weird. Over time, hopefully, we're not strangers anymore. They've lived with us for 8 months now. But they have losses. They have to grieve. And they're only kids. So I know a lot about grieving now, about leaning into the pain. They don't. They avoid the pain. And it's like, oh, that's not a great way to go. That's going to be hard for you to bond with me if you haven't processed your loss. So I know that it's not healthy, but I can't change that. They're grieving as they want to grieve right now, and they're just kids,
Right. But what is great is think about you won't take it personal. Your understanding of,
well, that's the ideal, but boy, in the moment,
do you take it personal sometimes?
well, inevitably, right? Like, why are you being so rude to me, right? What are you doing?
I'm just trying to give you love.
I'm just being loving.
Yeah.
And so intellectually, yes.
Oh yeah, but you still, moment, I think you probably have more tools than most people.
I think so, but I wish I had even more. Let's put it that way.
We're all working on that. I always joke with that when my girls walk out the door, and the last one goes, I'll be like, wait, I have an idea about maybe how to start doing this,
right?
Because that's just how it is. So,
right, yeah.
Do you feel is a different Colin dad showing up now than with Ruby and Hart? Is there something? What's different about that?
It is different because I lost my temper with Ruby and Hart, and I feel like now I don't as easily. I have more of a sense of, I don't know, the universe is just like, and there's loss in there and grief. I don't know. It just feels like I do take things less personally. But I still fail at times as a parent. But for sure, I have bad moments like, oh, why did I do that? Why? But I feel like there's a little more of an appreciation that we're not in control. That's what it is. We're not in control. No. And so, you do what you can do, but you can't fix everything. I can't fix their grief, And I think maybe in the past I thought maybe I would be able to. Yeah. And I'm not in control of if they'll ever love me back.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just don't know.
You share in the book that Ruby went through a period of hard time with some OCD, and she just went through a hard time as teenagers do. And you guys, through time and the right therapist and just the right situation, got her into a great place. But when you say now, like, hey, we're not in control, as a parent, I had a daughter go through some pretty hard stuff. And I remember, as hard as it was when you do really come to terms with that you're not in control. Yeah. There is some, at least for me, and I'd love to know your feeling on this, is something about that makes it so much easier because you don't really have a choice to surrender. Mm-hmm. You're faced with, this is how it is, which is you are not in control. Yeah. So you might as well get over that idea. Right. There's something freeing. Yeah. Where you go, oh, that's uncomfortable. Right. Ooh, right. They're going through that. I don't really like that. I don't like that for them. Yeah. And yet having a different relationship with that, because you finally have come to terms with, deal with it. Yeah. Yeah. That took me a long time with Ruby. So I thought initially that I could control it. I could rescue her out of OCD. And what's so ironic, of course, is that OCD is all about control. It's all about thinking that you can control all sorts of things. If you tap correctly or this or that, you can save people's lives and protect people. And so that journey of accepting that we're not in control is the journey that Ruby was on. I really appreciated your chapter on rage. Yeah. That permission. And there was something in particular, hate du jour. I have a friend, my friend who her son, passed away. Right. She talked about, sometimes she would journal, and it was like her talk shit journal. Oh, nice. Yeah. So she's like, oh yeah. And he has this thing in there, and I just totally related to it. And can you share what hate du jour is? Because whether it's like big time grief or just, hey, life hardships. Right. Again, for me, this book is obviously it's specific. It's around a specific tale, but a lot of these ideas I think would help people with so many different things. Thank you. Everyone
should buy my book, right?
Everybody should buy your book.
Thank you.
And if they can be, I want to go see your show, but
nice.
Can you, Hate du jour, where did you come up with this?
So Gail called it initially her grief burn book. So she would journal about these people who were well-meaning or whatever in our community that we're trying to help, and then would do something that would piss us off, or just strangers that would piss us off. And my wife is very funny. She's written for television, for comedies on television for the past 25 years. And so she is very, very funny and very dark humor, fierce. She's a fierce woman. And so she would dig in and say the most vitriolic things you can imagine about these poor, basically kind people who were bungling it. And then I would do my own version, which was not as clever or funny as hers. But we would tell them to each other to amuse each other. And her sister, Betsy, called them our hate du jours. And I love that because it feels, it makes it like, the little Frenchify, like it's kind of fun. It's like a game, like the hate du jour. I don't know. I enjoyed that. It made it feel less bitter and more amusing. More us like dealing with the impossibleness of it, of our lives, right? It's absurd what things that would happen. People would say things to us. And so I loved them also because the hate du jours, it never hurt anybody. It was just me and Gail journaling or telling it to each other. And that was it. And so the person would never know how angry we got in that moment, and we could let it go a little bit, let it go. And sometimes our hate du jour would be something super innocent, like just some friendly, nice person, and we would just rip into them because we were angry at the universe ultimately, right?
Yeah.
The whole fucking universe.
Yeah.
So it helped us get some of that out in a very non-damaging way.
How did you guys not take it out on each other?
Yeah.
I mean,
right.
That when we're so close to a person,
right.
That's the safe
Yes,
person.
Exactly. You hurt the people closest to you.
Is it because you were both going through it that you're maybe more empathetic to the other person?
I think maybe, yeah. We never were vicious to each other. Every now and again, we would get to a place where we would start to argue, or start to be like, I'm like, whoa, okay, let's not take it out on each other. And we said, let's not take it out on each other. And then we'd back way down. Yeah.
Did you increase your physical practice through this? Maybe, working and raising 2 children, and then after, did it become something that was almost more prioritized of I have to fortify my actual physical health during this? Yeah, I did think if we're going to adopt kids, I'm older now because they're going to be younger than Ruby. So I'm older. I'm an older parent. I better stay healthy. That was definitely something that helped me. And during the pandemic, we both got extra healthy because we just exercised every day. And that felt good. And I think that notion of feeling good, it's hard at first to do things that feel good. It feels like we're not allowed to. Right? How are we allowed to feel pleasure or take care of ourselves? It feels like a betrayal of our grief. Yeah. And then I think we wrestle with that, but partly because Megan Devine, that was that's very clearly that's the suffering part. That's the voice of suffering coming in and telling me I should suffer, and nothing to do with honoring Ruby and Hart. And me being healthy is going to honor Ruby and Hart better than me being, sickly and not taking care of myself. Yeah, look at how good, I am at being. Right. Look how much I'm suffering. I'm just a good dad. I'm lying on the ground. Yeah. And I'm such a good dad. So, yeah. Would you maybe just spend a few minutes kind of sharing a few things? We've been talking so much and alluding to Ruby and to Hart, but just today, in this moment, what shows up when you hear their names or you think of them? Yeah. Just right now, I just thought of when they were much younger, Ruby would love to dress Hart up, and he would be a willing puppet first. So she was the director and he was the actor in their performances.
And she would regularly put him in dresses and wigs and put ridiculous makeup on him. And he was like, I don't know, he was 7 maybe, and she was 10. And one time she put him in this blonde wig and had smeared makeup. So he looked like some kind of like punk rock kind of damaged soul in this dress. And he had a club. He had one of those like, I don't know, a club that if you hit it made noises. And then she would come out in the living room and announce the character that he was going to play. I forget what this character's name was. And then he would appear. And I have a video of him. And he just sort of comes out and he starts screaming and waving this thing around like as if he was high on drugs. But he didn't know anything about drugs. But that's what he was acting like. He was like on some kind of very powerful drug. And just to amuse Gail and I. And that kind of captures their essence, that he's the performer, she's the director, she's the brains, he's the charm, and they had a ridiculous imagination. Yeah. And he's outrageous, his appearance. He had high heels on too, so he stumbles in drunk on high heels, drunk and high, and waving a thing around with smeared makeup and a wig, and yeah, that's Ruby and Hart.
You capture their essence in the book. I felt like as much as I was learning about what you guys were going through, I felt them.
Oh, nice.
Through the whole book. Do you think there are things that we can do in a practice in our lives without having experienced this to make us more resilient as things come at us?
Oh,
do you have?
That's a great question. Yeah. I'm interested in resiliency. And I wanted to, there's like a book about it or something that caught my eye. I was like, oh, I want to read that. I want to see what they have to say about resiliency. That's interesting. I think there was a core concept that they shared that resonated, and now I can't remember it. But I don't know. Other than the idea of not being in denial. And I think we can be in denial about all sorts of things. And if the less we're in denial, the more we're attuned to the here and now and what's actually happening, I think means that we're more present and then therefore more resilient, I think.
And do you take everything always so head on? Like if a friend or even a stranger is like doing something that you think, I don't really like that. Do you just go, hey, what's going on with you? Are you sort of one of those people that just sort of nips it straight away, like all the time?
Not all the time, no. That would be nice though. I wish I were that. I wish I were that, but that's the goal. I think I feel that's the goal. Yeah. I wanted to share one more Ruby and Hart story.
I want to hear as many as
just
you
because
have.
I was just thinking about it because we're here in lovely Malibu right now, beautiful views, and this is where we used to go initially for our beach. So Ruby and Hart and Gail and I would come down that Los Virgenes is how they pronounce it, right?
Oh, yeah. It's a beautiful canyon.
It's a beautiful canyon.
Yeah.
I love that ride. And this is the first time I've been here since the crash.
Oh, really?
Yeah, to Malibu. Because I go to Santa Monica Beach now.
How did it feel?
A little rough. Yeah. I was struck by the beauty of it. I had sort of forgotten just how beautiful it was. I remember taking people from out of town and be like, wait till you come down this path to the beach. This is amazing.
Because you're low, so everything is so majestic above you.
Yeah. And you go through tunnels. It's pretty staggering.
Are you a honker?
No.
Through tunnels?
No.
Oh, you're not one of those?
Fun? No.
Yeah.
It should be like you're holding your breath through a tunnel.
Okay. I thought that was graveyards.
Oh.
When I was a kid. It was like, oh.
You hold your breath? Nice. No.
So you weren't a honker?
No.
Okay.
But should you be a honker? Is that fun to honk in the tunnels?
I think you scare the drivers around you, but it's pretty typical to honk through tunnels like
because it echoes and it's charming.
It's a whole thing.
Okay.
I could see Ruby being someone who's like, yo, honk that horn.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
But no, I think she'd be more like, oh, that sounds too rude. She was like, yeah. Yeah, that might upset other,
So
other drivers. Maybe a Hart might be like, let's honk. But we used to go to Point Doom, and then we'd call it the special walk that takes you to the special private cove we called Pirate Cove. I'm sure that's not what it's called, but do you know what walk I'm talking about?
I do.
You have to walk up these rocks, and it's a little perilous. When they were young, it would feel a little dangerous.
It might be like
cool
the difference of like Little Dune and Great Dune. Are you talking about if maybe Pirates Cove, is it sort of pretty empty?
Yeah, you can only get there by walking over the rocks. There's
Yes.
no down. You have to park in Point Doom and then walk to get there.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tiny little beach. It's almost always empty, and we love that. We loved taking people to what we called Pirates Cove when they were younger. Yeah.
So when you say rough, how does that show up now, a few years later?
It just makes me ache. Yeah, it makes my heart ache. So I'm going to go down there. I'm going to go down after this. I'm going to go to Point Doom.
You are?
Yeah. Just,
Do you have, I know you said when the kids were in the pool that you kind of go and talk to them. Do you have like an active dialogue with them or sort of just, communicate or how does that work?
A little bit. I don't feel like we have a dialogue. I think I just call out to their spirits. Mm-hmm. Being an atheist and all, I don't believe that they're really out there. I think they're really here. They're in me and their friends, and our family.
And are you and Gail different here? Does she have a?
We're a little different. She says she believes in God, but her God is not like some
guy with a white beard.
That makes decisions and is paying attention to us. So we're kind of similar, I guess, because I'm like, I just believe in love, and she believes in. I don't know. Is it the God? Yeah, a little different, but not too different, not radically different.
If someone's listening to this, I think as supporters of people going through something, I think it's been made really clear. If someone is going through, and maybe, I don't want to say this the wrong way, but maybe they've grieved the wrong way, that hasn't helped them move further into it in a way.
Maybe they've just avoided it for now.
Yes. What invitation, either to someone newly in a situation going, oh, I don't know the first step, or somebody who's like, I've been trying, I just haven't gotten there yet. What invitation would you make to them? And also, it feels important to let people know that because you sort of are talking about, hey, this process of grieving doesn't mean that certain elements or the pain, it goes away.
Right. I think that people grieving a loss, they don't want to be told what to do. So in a way, it's not really anybody else's place to tell them how to grieve, or that's not going to work.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or to say like, it seems like you're stuck in your grief. Why don't you try this? If you haven't had like a remarkably similar loss,
but
like
that's
literally,
you
like
have.
remarkable. But even
let's say an invitation. Let someone comes to you and says, "Hey, I feel I'm handcuffed." And you'd say, "I'd like to make this," because I agree with you. I don't want to be told what to do. Nobody wants to be told what to do.
Right.
And that's like the least you're really tuned out.
Yeah.
If you're like, "Hey."
Yeah.
But what invitation or what starting point, or if you could shine a light, and say, if you're up for it, just take a look over there.
Right.
Besides, obviously, your book, which I really appreciate because you say it so perfectly. People don't know what to say, and you're like finding the words.
Yeah,
is in the title. But what would you extend to them?
What I like about my book is that you can read it and then you can put it away. Like you're not in charge. You don't have to respond. Like in person, it's trickier. Like I can't. It's harder for me to even just say what's in my book to somebody directly, because then they have to deal with me in the moment, and they can't just be like, stop for a second. I don't want to hear that right now. But in a book, they can look at it and they can put it down. They can look at it later if they want. You know what I mean? Like they're in control. Yeah. I think that's important, that the grievers are in control of how they're receiving this information. But if someone came to me and said, I'm struggling, I think I would talk about community. I would talk about the ways that have helped me find community, keep community, grieving groups, grief groups, and grief books that have helped me, resources. Yeah. And then through that, they can find their own journey. Because like I said, everybody avoids grief. We need to. You can't just grieve all the time. You wouldn't be in life. Right? That was another way of being trapped if you're just grieving, it feels to me. So it's not like a criticism. I've just found personally that I try to engage with it as often as it seems like a good idea. And that helps me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for my birthdays, I do it's interesting. I change it now and we go to the beach, but instead it's a memorial for Ruby and Hart. Not my birthday. So I don't want cards, I don't want presents, but I want people to, we spelled out Ruby and Hart's names and we said, Ruby and Hart, we jumped in the ocean just a week ago. And my therapist said, that's interesting. Does your birthday always need to be tied to the deaths of your children? And I was like, oh, that's an interesting question. No, that sounds like I'm trapped somehow. And I'm not allowing myself to honor my own birthday. I'm saying, no, I don't deserve a birthday. I need to grieve. And that's definitely how it felt in the first years for sure. I did not feel like I deserved a birthday. I was like, I'll never have a birthday again. And now I'm like, well, I can see someday in the future, I might be able to celebrate my birthday alone and not make it paired completely with grief. But right now I need it to be.
Yeah.
So I can't have a birthday, woohoo, happy birthday. I can't. I just have to have it be like, hey, it's my birthday. My kids died 4 years and 3 months ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I can at least now I can see a potential in the future that maybe I would celebrate my birthday. But I don't want to right now.
Yeah. I think that's also really important for people to hear. It's like, hey, it's really good to do it the way that it's right for you.
Yeah.
That's so important.
Yeah.
Justin, do you have a question? Justin always gets one question.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
I do. Was there like a moment or a conversation? When did you decide to put your show together?
Oh, the play.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I started writing it right away. Just like a week after the crash, I began writing it. It was just like a short piece and it was super dark. And I showed it to Gail and I was like, what do you think about this? She said, I love this. Keep writing. I'm like, okay. So I kept writing, and now it's a full-length show. And I thought, I'm going to perform it in front of people. And back then, it was at that point 5 months after the crash, maybe 6 months after the crash, and it was very raw, super raw. And I invited the Rebeccas over, the same woman that made the shirts, said, hug me, don't hug Gail. And I said, can I give you my show? And like, yes. And they I remember delivering it to them. I had it memorized. And their faces, they were just like in agony. It was brutal. It was like, because I was just grieving and they were grieving and they were just thinking about Ruby and Hart and me and they're crying, thinking about my destroyed life. I was like, wow, that was like a torture. That was a terrible thing to do to my dear, dear friends. They're so wonderful that they sat through that. But I'm going to perform it anyway because I'm so angry at the universe. And then COVID happened and shut it down. So I couldn't perform it to anybody else. So I only inflicted it on them and I think my sister-in-law, Betsy. And then a couple of years went by. I wrote a book. The book got published. And then I thought, I want to do my show again.
Yeah.
I'm ready now and it's different. I have more remove and now I'm playing an early version of me that was in acute grief, but I'm not in acute grief anymore. I'm in a different place. I'm still grieving, but I'm not in acute grief anymore. And like I said, I didn't know how it would go over. I really thought people would walk out. because it's so like the idea of triggering, like, give people trigger warnings.
Oh God.
I was like, I sent emails to people who had lost children. It's like, come see my show, but trigger warning, that like, forget it. Like the whole thing is a trigger. Like every single word I say is going to trigger. Like that's crazy. So good luck to you. I think I said that. Good luck to you. That's how I signed off. And they all came. And nobody ran out. Nobody ran out, and they laughed and they cried. And nobody got mad at me, even though I offend people, I imagine. Because I do end I end in a place of grace, and openness, and empathy. So initially, the impetus was anger. I was angry at the universe. I'm going to show this show. This show is going to like hurt you, audience. And then
bring a friend.
But here you go. But then after time, it evolved, and then I wanted to share it for a different reason. I didn't want to hurt anybody. I wanted to help people by normalizing grief, by normalizing the ugliness that can happen as we grieve, and saying that's okay too.
Yeah,
that's okay to have these ugly thoughts. We all have them. We all compare grief, all of us, all the time, right? Well, they think they have it bad. They should mind their own business, right?
Well, and the thing is, you didn't choose it. It showed up for you, and you're saying, this is how I'm dealing with it. These are my thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
And that honesty does give people the permission to be like, yeah, me too.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
There's like two more things I really want to touch upon is you being there for like the grandparents and the aunts and uncles. Yeah. How did you navigate that? Because they have real loss. Yeah. And so how is it they get it from other places? Like how does that work?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very complicated thing because they're our closest family.
Yeah.
But many of them have kids, and they love us, and they love Ruby and Hart so much, and they're devastated by those losses, and they're desperate to help Gail and I, desperate, and we have lots of anger, and so it's so hard sometimes to navigate that complicated situation. They're so helpful. I'm so grateful for them and all that they've done. But it's not an easy path to be the sister, brother, or sister-in-law, brother-in-law to people who've lost children. We're not easy, Yeah. And so occasionally there's like flare-ups, and we're like, you can't do this. You know what I mean?
You have your lives, and we're, here, and then.
And so we try not to play that card, but sometimes we don't play that card. But sometimes it's like you can't treat us like we're normal. When we come for family gatherings, it's not normal. Even though it seems like we're okay, we're not okay, and family gatherings are difficult. So it's very strange. It's like family gatherings are so important; they're so helpful. And then we're also introducing new people into our family, right? We've got these children we're fostering to adopt, and that's complicated, and they don't want to meet these new relatives. So it's not like easy. Like, hey, it's like we're coming to the party with all sorts of baggage, right? We've got grief. We've got kids who are grieving. They're angry. They want to be on their phones. They don't want to sit at a dinner table with strangers. You know what I mean? But like, we're just baggage. And I'm so grateful that my family is accepting of our baggage, and then also sometimes when we like blow up and are like, no, I'm not going to do that, or whatever it is, the small petty thing that suddenly becomes non-negotiable for us. Yeah,
I think that level of honesty, though, people can figure it out.
Yeah,
it's like. It's uncomfortable. But at that level of honesty, and I think eventually when you're done performing your show, you should tape it and do a special of sorts. And
I think so too.
Oh, get on that. I mean, you have a wife who's a writer. I'm sure you have producer friends.
Yeah.
I think absolutely you should do it because
Netflix should call me.
They should. Netflix, Colin Campbell. No, but the thing is, they should. I mean, you should put it out there. So if you would not be opposed to reading one thing that was the last thing in your book, I took a picture of it. If you could, and I hope it's okay, and you can say, no, Gabby, I'm not going to read that.
Of course.
But I thought it was, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I just want to say that you're doing so much out of your own grief, and you say make that productive. You say that in your book to, be productive with it.
Yeah.
And I really, I just really appreciate what you and Gail, because I also know it's like her pain too. She's giving you the green light,
right,
to say, okay, express our pain.
Yeah. I talk about our sex life in the show.
Yeah, no, I do. I did appreciate that you talk about that.
Book.
So for couples, finding your way back to one another, because I think it was something like nothing shrivels up your dick more than grief. So I really, you talk about it all, and this is the stuff that people go through,
right?
And how you have the hope that you're giving people too, of like, by the way, we did find our way back to each other.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. You mentioned that your friend said that she read my book and felt seen, and that means so much to me.
First time that she felt seen.
Yeah. That means the world to me, because then, they're not so alone.
No.
Yeah. Okay, so this is from Maya Angelou. And it's not the entire poem.
No.
So for those who are fans are aghast at my editing her beautiful, beautiful poem, but I want to pick just the end chunk, because she's writing about great artists. So I'm taking this piece to just be about the people we love. Mm-hmm. And when great souls die, after a period, peace blooms slowly and always irregularly. Spaces fill with a kind of soothing electric vibration. Our senses, restored, never to be the same, whisper to us, they existed. They existed. We can be and be better, for they existed. Yeah.
Colin Campbell, the book is Finding the Words. And I just thank you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. This was a really beautiful conversation.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. If you want to learn more, there is a ton of valuable information on my website. All you have to do is go to GabrielleReece.com or head to the episode show notes to find a full breakdown with helpful links to studies, research, books, podcasts, and so much more. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out and send them to @GabbyReece on Instagram. And if you feel inspired, please subscribe. I'll see you next week. This podcast is brought to you by Laird Superfood. In 2015, Laird Superfood was created, but it was really actually created in my kitchen by my husband, Laird. And he was always experimenting with coffees and other ingredients for performance. And lo and behold, Laird Superfood was born. And we have beautiful coffees and creamers and protein bars and other things. But one of the things I'm very excited about is our new greens product. A lot of Americans are not getting enough fruits and vegetables. Something like 85% are not getting enough vegetables and 80% are not getting enough fruit. And we need fiber. So for me personally, I'm always trying to encourage people, and I know this is Laird's philosophy as well, is real food, right? Let's try to get as much of the good stuff, the minerals, the nutrients, the macro, the micronutrients from real food. But it's hard to do. Our soil's different. People are busy. Maybe you don't know what you're getting at your grocery store. So this is a way to get it done and bridge some of those nutritional gaps. And what I also really appreciate about it, besides that it tastes good, I just do it in water first thing in the morning, then I'm done. And then I actually go and have my coffee after. But we use upcycled fruits and veggies, so things that won't go to waste. Maybe they're not really pretty, so we use them in our fruits and veggies. We use no fillers. So your body actually knows what to do with the ingredients. They know how to absorb it. There's fiber. And also, we never use any artificial or natural flavors. This is something that is harder than people realize, because to amplify flavors, a lot of times even, using natural flavors is the way to do it. So I'm excited to share with you. And if you'd like to try it out, all you have to do is go to lairdsuperfood.com. And if you punch in the code Gabby, Gabby 20,
you will receive 20% off.